You can study in the morning, you can study at night. You can study outside by a campfire light. You can study with the Rabbi.
In the past couple of weeks, questions of personal identity have really come into the limelight. From Caitlyn Jenner to Rachel Dolezal. Caitlyn Jenner, who identified for decades as a man and now identifies as a woman. Rachel, who identified herself for decades as an African-American woman, but was in fact a Caucasian woman. We are facing in society today real questions about identity. Where does identity come from? Do I have the right to change my identity? You know, for most of us, there's tremendous comfort in identifying ourselves in relationship to others. That's why we create groups and communities. I'm a Jewish male, Jewish white man, and being in each of those groups, identifying as each of those things, helps me understand who I am. But what happens when one of those identities that I've been given, I didn't choose them. I didn't choose to be a Jewish white male. I was given those identities. What do we do when one of those identities doesn't fit, doesn't feel right? This isn't just something that we are seeing in the tabloids. This is something that as a rabbi, I deal with all the time. When people come to me because their identity as a Christian or their identity as some other faith doesn't fit, and they decide that they want to change their identity to become a Jew. That happens all the time in my work, and now we're seeing it in the larger world, perhaps a bit of a different scale. What does it mean to change your identity from a man to a woman? What does it mean to identify as an African American when you look Caucasian? I don't know what the answer is, but I do think that we're finally being forced to accept that while groups and labels are comfortable, they're not always helpful, and sometimes they can be very hurtful. I've often struggled with the idea of movements. I've said in Judaism that movements are like putting on blinders that say I can only do and believe what my movement tells me I can do and believe, when in fact, for me personally, I think there's beauty in all of the movements. I think there's beauty in Reform and Reconstructionist Judaism, in secular Judaism, in Orthodox Judaism, in conservative Judaism. And what I would really love to do is bring together pieces from all of those and be the under-constructionist Jew that I believe that I am. I want to self-identify. And yet, I also see the real power in joining together with other conservative Jews at a conservative synagogue, a place where we share values, we share practices, we share identity. So we're now struggling, we're in this place of struggling between the real power of group identification, self-identification as part of a group, and also being able to identify yourself as distinct from these groups of which you've always traditionally been a part. Judaism actually has a number of different ways of identifying. I read an article recently that said that in the Torah there are actually 6 different gender identifications. We always think that it's just men and women, but it's not. In Jewish text, we have 6 different gender identifications. These identifications, these groupings are not as simple as we'd like them to be. They're comforting and they're comfortable. They make connecting to others easy. They make understanding ourselves a little more simple. But they're not simple. In this week's Torah portion, Korach goes through a struggle of self-identification. Who am I? Moses, you have all the power. You have all the glory. But who am I? How do I matter? Who am I meant to be? Sometimes those questions can be answered in the context of a community, but sometimes they can only be answered by the person themselves. And those of us looking from the outside in, we may not understand why a person identifies as this or identifies as that. But biology is not the totality of who we are. Our chemistry is not the sole determinant of our identity. There is a spiritual nature, an emotional and psychological nature to identity. When somebody comes to me because they want to convert to Judaism, it's not about biology, it's about spirit. They are leaving one group and joining another because their self-identity feels at odds with what they've been given from birth. And our job as Jews is to accept them. I wonder if we can extend that teaching to those in our world who are going through the same process, but in different ways, trying to discover who they are and still find their place in the larger community and in humanity.
Let's talk some Torah. It's okay as you will see that we're bound to disagree. Don't have to see eye to eye to make the Torah come alive. Now that I've had my say, let's not waste the whole day